This is my 2020 C8 Corvette. I bought it brand new in 2020 and put a little over 20,000 miles on it during my ownership. And while that's not an incredible amount of miles to put on your car in the span of 4 years, it is a healthy mix of daily driving, mountain runs, and track time. It is a 3LT Z51 performance package, meaning that it is probably the highest trim version of the car that you can get, or at least it was at the time. It's got mag ride, it's got front end lift, or it did. It's got the personal data recording software inside so you can record yourself at the track. It's got every button that's on the dashboard. And don't get me wrong, I am very far away from a professional driver, but I feel like in the time that I've owned it, I've experienced a lot of what makes this car great and what makes this car not so great. Let's get into it, shall we? Now, first things first, you guys need to know my disposition on this car because I am biased. I mean, I love this car, I truly do. For real, it is my favorite car that I've ever owned. I smile every time I get into it. So yes, I am very biased, but I'm gonna try to be as honest as I possibly can here. Now, there are some topics that I do want to cover in today's video that I think are really important when purchasing a car or just in general knowing about a car, right? Aesthetics, public response, performance, reliability and maintenance, economy and convenience, aftermarket mod support, and most importantly, fun. All right, so I think the first thing we should talk about is aesthetics, right? Physical attraction. I think this is gonna come down to preference on whether or not you like the C8. Because if I'm being honest with you, the first time I saw the C8 when it was introduced, I wasn't impressed. I didn't think it looked good. And I think a lot of people shared the same sentiment. Man, a ceramic coat would be really great right now. I mean, if we're being real, a lot of cars don't look good until you've got a good set of wheels on them. And that's usually what sets a car apart for me, is the wheels. I mean, what the hell was GM thinking when they gave us these photos? They're like, hey, look at the new C8 Corvette. And everyone's like, what? And I do think physical attraction towards a car is important, right? Like, you're not gonna wanna get outside and wash and clean a car that you don't think is good to look at. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there's about a million other things that are important when it comes to choosing out the right car for you. Like performance or comfort, reliability, stuff like that. And we'll cover those here in a second. And personally, the C8 happens to be one of those cars where I don't think it looks too awesome from the factory. Which, you know, there's not a lot of cars that really roll off the showroom floor looking perfect. Even like most traditional supercars could use a good set of wheels and a wing. And I think the C8 itself, without those, looks weird. But it certainly is a car with a lot of potential, and I think GM did that on purpose despite them hating the aftermarket scene. Did I run into paint or something? What the fuck is this? And you know, again, I think this is gonna come down to preference. You're either attracted to the C8 in its final forms or you're not. Whenever I'm looking for my next car, I'm always looking for a platform that I can expand on. I don't want something that's finished because that takes out half the fun for me. I think it's an attractive car with the right combination. I think you have to work to get it to where you want it to be. And if you're already attracted to the car aesthetically and its base form, then you're only gonna like it more when you throw some wheels on it or your favorite wing, whatever it may be, wherever your head's at. Being attracted to your own car is one thing, but how do other people seem to like it, right? What's the response like of the general public? And around town, it's great. I live in a smaller town in Georgia, you know, not in Atlanta, but close enough. And the C8s are becoming more and more common, right? You're starting to see them more in smaller areas because they're becoming more affordable. Pretty much anytime I make a stop at the gas station or a store or I'm in the car, I receive questions about it. People want to talk about it, especially in the modded configuration with the active aero and the wheels and the wrap and whatnot. It garners a lot of attention. So in stock form, people like them, but when they're modded, people really like them. Now, of course, I don't live in like some big city like Los Angeles or New York where they're a dime a dozen, right? So most reactions are either, wow, that's an incredible car for an incredible price, I haven't seen one in person, or that's not what I would spend my money on, which is also a valid argument. Everyone's allowed to have preferences, right? Which that's where the split is between what people say online and what people say in person. In person, it's nothing but nice things, and that could just be fake people being fake. But on the internet is where you'll get people talking shit. It's not this, it's not that, it doesn't have this, it'll never be that. I mean, I think the internet has a little bit of disdain towards them for a few reasons. It's not a supercar, so it misses the supercar crowd. It's not a manual, so it misses the muscle car crowd. So it puts the car in a very small category of people who are actually interested in the car, right? It's split into like 2 or 3 subgroups. You got the boomers who are gonna buy it no matter what because it's a Corvette, and they're gonna keep it stock, drive it twice a month on Sundays when it's not raining. Then you've got the young guy with some money crowd, right? Some young entrepreneur kid who's in his 20s, got some money, you know, not Lamborghini money, not Ferrari money, but you know, he still wants to show people he's doing good. So he buys the car because it looks and acts like a supercar to people who don't know what it is. Can't tell you how many times I've had people ask me if it's a Ferrari. But then you have probably an even smaller category of people like me who want to modify the car and drive it hard and test it for what it is and likes the way it looks. I mean, all around. So I think the internet's take is a little bit different than public opinion because people on the internet have privilege of sight, right? You can see better cars all day long. And while it is becoming a more affordable car, it's still expensive. And I think that drives people away from it thinking, well, you know, what do these things go new right now? 70 to 90? For that price, you can get into other very nice vehicles. You can get into cheaper Porsches. Hell, you can even get used Lamborghini Gallardos for that price. And a lot of car guys aren't gonna spend that kind of money on the base to get them where they wanna be because, you know, buying a $40,000 car and dumping $20,000 into it is a lot different than buying an $80,000 car and then dumping $20,000 into it. Completely different tax brackets, completely different experience. Plus, I think it's also really easy to fuck these cars up if you don't get the stance right, or if you don't get the wheels right, or if you don't get the fitment right, or if you don't get the wrap right. And you know, should you really base your opinion off of whether or not you're gonna buy a vehicle based off what other people think about it? No, absolutely not. You should buy something that you want. But I think a lot of people who would buy a car like this are looking for social gratification. Ugh, I gotta wash the wheels. Fuck, I don't wanna. Washing white wheels blows dick. White wheels was a crazy decision, bro. What was I thinking, doing white wheels? Oh yeah, that's what I was thinking. See, that's why I like white wheels, that's right. Oh yeah, much better. Sidebar here, I know your bad habit. That's right, I know all about you. And I'm not here to judge, I would never do that. But today's sponsor, Fume, can definitely help you with it. Fume is an excellent way to help you kick your bad habits. And I know what you're thinking, but nope, it's not a vape, there's no electronics, and most importantly, there's no dangerous chemicals, just flavored air. And there's a ton of great flavors with excellent tastes, like crisp mint or spearmint, white cranberry, sparkling grapefruit, orange vanilla, which is my favorite, and a bunch more. No vapor, no nicotine, just naturally and deliciously flavored air. But my favorite part is just how good it is for fidgeting. It magnetically snaps together when you're reloading it, and the dial for the air adjustment is super notchy sounding. And the weight is just perfect. Now, Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. And for a limited time, you can use my coupon code DOITWITHDAN, and you get a free topper, which is the perfect accessory for your Fume. Just slip it over the mouthpiece for a softer and warmer feel. Wow. It's chewable for those of you who love to fidget, and it's reusable. Head to tryfume.com, that's tryfum.com, and use coupon code DOITWITHDAN at checkout, or use the QR code in this right here on the screen somewhere. I think I put it over here, maybe I put it over there. I don't know. And you get your topper for free when you order the Journey Pack. Thank you again, Fume, for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to the review. All right, so we gotta talk about performance, right? When it comes to sports cars, performance is a key factor. You're not gonna talk about a Corvette without talking about performance. And on the track or in the mountains, it performs amazing. There's no denying it. GM reverse engineered a Ferrari and then put an LS in it. I mean, I know it's an LT motor, but let's be real, it's the same thing, dude. I mean, it's got amazing brakes, it handles amazing, and it's got a pretty powerful motor behind it. Almost 500 horsepower out of a naturally aspirated V8. That's pretty damn good, dude. And had you asked me just a few years ago if I thought that it needed more power, I would have said no. I think it's perfect the way it is. I love the way it rides and drives, and I feel like the power delivery is so linear and it's so perfect for doing anything that you'd want to do. But now, however, I'm definitely jonesing for a little extra power. A supercharger or a turbo on this thing would really waken this car up. I'd even say like a nice cam, but I kind of feel like this car doesn't need to lope like most Corvettes. I do love a good lumpy stick, you know, but I do feel like a choppy cam and a rough idle would ruin the experience of driving something like this. Yeah, I do like it, but just a little bit more medium to top end would be really nice. When you hit that power band, if it really sucked you in the seat, giggity, you know, really gave you the old hot, different story. Now, another important point for me, if that's something I'd like to touch on, would be like quality, reliability, and maintenance. Now, this is a first-year C8 Corvette, the first year it was produced, and usually when GM puts out something for the first time, it's a little buggy, right? It's got its, as Doug would say, quirks and features about it. GM is known for having electrical issues, and you know, I was having some electrical issues at one point or another. Turned out to be a loose battery cable, and the dealership charged me $700 to replace the battery cable. Now, your average oil change isn't gonna cost that much more than your other V8 cars, right? I mean, it does require a certain amount of oil. I wanna say if I go get it changed at the dealership, it costs around the $110 to $120 range. Don't you pull out on me, that was close. And that is a little bit more expensive than your, you know, kind of other cars. But if you're getting work done by a dealer, or having work done on the car in general, expect a Corvette tax. Things are just a little bit more expensive for the Corvette than they are, let's say, a Camaro or a Mustang or a Challenger because of the name. I genuinely think that's what it is. There's probably a little bit more to it. There are a lot of proprietary stuff too, which does, it costs more sometimes to get like the car serviced or to have repair parts. My front right strut is blown on this car. Not the actual strut. The strut itself is fine, but the lift system that raises the car up and down to get over speed bumps and stuff like that has been faulty for some time because I blew one of the diaphragms, and the dealership wants like $2,500 to fix that. And that's OEM, that's not aftermarket. And it is a performance car, so things like brakes and tires are expensive, you know? Now, as far as quality goes, that's kind of more of a preference thing, right? I've always preferred GM out of the big three, especially the interiors. I've always really liked GM's interiors. The fit and finish on every Corvette and Camaro that I've owned has always been really good. That's not to say that they don't have their own issues though. I've got friends who have C8s, similar years as mine, with their own interior and exterior issues. I mean, it is a Corvette. They're known for not having the best fitment of panels. They're all handmade and hand-fitted. They are super hard to get consistent panel gaps. So that's why you do see some of these with completely different panel gaps and fitment compared to each other. The way my shit fits is not the way your shit's gonna fit. And reliability is kind of a weird one for me too, because this car has never left me stranded, and nothing's ever really broken on it that, as far as I know, hasn't been my fault. It does have the occasional error. My side mirrors that would alert me if someone is in my blind spot, that stopped working completely. I've also had the door latches say service door latches consistently. It kind of comes and goes now. And again, both of these issues could be my fault. I've taken apart the car so many times, I've had other shops work on the car so many times, that it could be something that I haven't put back together. It could be a clip that I broke, it could be a pin that I've bent. It's hard for me to say whether or not that kind of stuff is my fault. But the point is, all of this stuff that's been broken is expensive to fix. Generally speaking, I think GM is pretty okay as far as reliability is concerned, and I assume any bugs or issues with this car have been found out since the beginning. But excluding those small things, the car has been incredibly reliable. I've had almost no issues with it. And to be honest, I do abuse it fairly consistently, and it's held up to my abuse. You know, but I think excluding like really rugged terrain or really bad roads, there's not anywhere that I wouldn't drive this thing. What about economy? Now, from a sports car perspective, I don't think much about economy. This car could get 4 miles to the gallon, and I wouldn't care. I'd probably still love it. Hell, people still like Hellcats, am I right? But it doesn't. It gets like 25 to 28 miles per gallon on the highway. It drops down into 4-cylinder mode, it kills 4 of the cylinders, and just cruises, man. It turns like nothing RPM-wise. I was on the way to see my parents the other day in an undisclosed location in Mexico, doing about 120 miles an hour for an hour. Getting like 18 miles per gallon, dude. It's actually hilarious. That being said, it has 0 storage space. There's no center console. There's hardly any cup holders. The glove box is minimum. The front storage is non-existent. The rear storage is non-existent. It is truly a hard vehicle to do anything in that isn't just whatever you're doing that day. You want to go golfing? Cool, you can do that. But that's about it, bro. This leads me to my next point, which is arguably one of my most important points, for me anyway, and possibly you guys, is aftermarket and mod support. Just a few years ago, anything other than an exhaust, a wrap, and some wheels was pretty much non-existent for these things. I mean, don't get me wrong, you had some other companies making some aftermarket carbon fiber bits and interior trim bits, and I think pretty quickly some air ride and suspension kits. The ECUs were locked down pretty hardcore. You couldn't tune them. Don't get me wrong, things like an intake and an exhaust are great for getting a couple more horsepower top and mid-range, but realistically, unless you were running a piggyback ECU system with its own fuel system, you couldn't make any hardcore power out of these things. Only up until the last couple of years have companies like Trifecta and HP Tuners been able to figure out how to crack the ECU so it can have supporting mods. And now we're seeing people with the stock ECU going 8, 9, 1,000 horsepower. People like Sissio Performance are making crazy power out of these things, and they're making them pretty reliably too. Thankfully now, the ECU is cracked and companies are making big power out of these things. But there's just one problem. It's expensive as shit. I've said it once and I'll say it again. Corvettes come with a Corvette tax. Sure, it's not as big as, let's say, a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or even an Audi, but it still exists. You're gonna pay a higher price for equal performance mods on this as you would a Mustang or a Camaro. And is that because it costs more to do so, or because they think that Corvette owners have more money? Either way, it's what the market says it's good for, right? I don't set the market, you do. But most importantly, I think we need to answer our final question here, and that is it fun? Is the C8 Corvette fun? And the answer is yeah, absolutely. It's the most fun car I've ever owned. It's also the most expensive car that I've ever owned. I guess if you don't count the dually. But it is also a Chevy. I drive my car hard because I don't feel like I'm destroying something precious and rare. It is a Chevy at the end of the day. And the car also brings a ton of conversation and a ton of attention. And like most car guys, I really like that about it. I like talking about my car. It's like my favorite thing. But at the end of the day, it sounds excellent, it's faster than most traffic, and it's a car that completely changes its personality with just a handful of mods. And hot take, for the price, I really don't think that there's a better performing car on the market. And I don't think that a manual would make this car more fun. I think it being an automatic kind of adds to the fake supercar feel. It's almost like you're role playing, right? That's kind of how it feels, is that you're role playing in a supercar. And I vibe with that. I do, I genuinely do. You know, but overall, I think my experience with owning the car has been damn near perfect. It's been relatively reasonable to modify. I've had a lot of fun with it. And while it could use a little bit more power long term, I think anybody would be very happy picking one of these cars up, especially if you get one for MSRP now that they've come down in price a little bit. With all that being said though, I want the Z06. I do want the Z06. I do want the Z06. But that is my take on the C8. Let me know if I missed anything. I'll try to answer them in the comments. I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay? Cool. And also, again, I want to say thank you to Fume for sponsoring today's video. Fume has been excellent to work with. Thank you for working with me. Don't forget, you can get your free tip using the coupon code DOITWITHDAN when you buy the Journey Pack. Remember, bad habits don't have to be bad if you take the bad out of the habit.